So in this segment, we're going to be talking about the Brexit costing the UK billions in lost trade and tax revenue. I think the figure they put it at is about 32 billion, based on some figures that they assessed, and that has cut our GDP by around 5%. It's just wild times. It's based on the economic modelling used. But we'll watch this video from ITV first, and we'll go on to the actual article, which I found both quite interesting.
A new dawn. That's exactly how Brexit was sold to the people of Brixham. But for some here, it hasn't worked out that way.
We mainly send through France. But
now, if anyone doesn't know who this gentleman is on the right, he was a person who supported Brexit quite strongly.
Holland.
The fish market is open and Ian Perks is buying. Almost all of his customers are in the EU, but nowadays to export fish there, you need to fill in forms. Ian says new customs rules are costing his business £300 a day.
I feel we've been brainwashed.
When the Prime Minister visited Brixham...
I mean, it's cost him £300 a day. That's crazy, for probably a small to medium business. I mean, that's a huge expense. And that's a lot of lost money for, HMRC potentially as well.
He told Ian his business would boom after Brexit.
Brexit has meant that we have to work harder for less money. We have to employ extra staff for the admin.
And that comes at a significant cost, because you've got people to deal with the paperwork, and potentially you've got to hire customs agents as well, and they are not going to be cheap, especially given they have a lot more business now.
I was the first one to put my hands up to say I'm sorry that I voted.
He was pretty quick, but at the same time, he's the kind of guy. I'm not going to say him personally, but they voted to take money from fish from European fishermen. That's what they wanted, to go back to the old 12-mile limit, and they got promised things that were too good to be true.
To come out of Europe, I really wish that we were still in it.
You regret it?
Oh, absolutely.
The Centre for European Reform has modelled the economic performance of a UK that remained in the EU, using data from countries whose performance was similar to ours before Brexit. It then compared this with the actual performance of the UK economy since the referendum 6 years ago.
Again, that's not an exact science. We have economic forecasts and things like that, but this won't be an exact amount, but it'll be the number that they figured out based on the metrics they used.
It concludes that by the end of last year, our economy was 5% smaller than it would have been had we stayed in the EU, that investment by businesses and government was 13% lower, so too was goods trade.
Now, foreign direct investment has gone down significantly, and of course our exports have gone down because the EU, our single largest trading partner, is stopped buying as much from us because of all the increased paperwork, the customs fees, the declarations, the SPS checks, everything. They will have a cost, and the importer is the one that pays the cost. So why would you buy from the UK when you can buy somewhere cheaper in the EU, for example? They might not have been cheaper than a Britain inside the EU, but obviously we're way more expensive than a lot of EU countries would be.
Services trade was 7% higher.
That's interesting. I'm not sure why the service trade gone up. That's quite interesting. Well, then again, we have temporary equivalency on certain services, but the service trade going up is an interesting one.
How can you be so sure that this damage has been caused by Brexit rather than the pandemic?
Most economies have recovered from COVID. Most economies are now bigger than they were just before the pandemic struck.
And that's an important point there that he's just made, that most of the world's economies are doing better than when the pandemic struck, and they are still growing. There's only two countries in the top 20 economies, the G20, that are not going to grow next year. One is Russia, which are obviously facing sanctions because of the war in Ukraine. They're at minus 4.9%. That's the prediction, and we're predicted to grow big fat 0%.
And so if the UK is quite so far behind, then Brexit has to be the major cause.
This analysis shows that Brexit has cost the UK billions of pounds in lost trade, lost investment and lost tax revenues. Money the country could really do with at a time of rising national debt and falling living standards. Of course, the Prime Minister promises to produce a high wage, high productivity, low...
High wage, but don't ask for a pay rise, because Johnson saying he warns of a wage price spiral if workers demand higher pay. So he wants a high wage economy, but don't demand higher wages. That's the key here. He wants you to have higher wages, but you should never ask for it, according to Boris Johnson. Yeah, we should all remember that.
Tax economy, but the evidence suggests that Brexit so far has produced the opposite. For many people, of course, Brexit was about greater
Pain. This one's painful.
political independence, not economic growth, and Karen Morris has no regrets.
How long were we in Europe? So, you know,
We're still in Europe. Geographically, we're still in Europe.
got to expect some sort of disruption.
It's the price that's worth paying.
Of
They
course
didn't say it would be any disruption, though. All of the promise they made are broken.
it is. In the long run, yeah.
Our economy has been hit by a series of shocks in recent years. The pandemic and the war in Ukraine are the primary causes of the cost of living squeeze we now.
But, every other country is going to be impacted by this as well, especially the ones that are nearer to Ukraine. They're the ones going to be dramatically impacted by, the war in Ukraine. So to just blame it on that and also, or say war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, to blame it on that and just the pandemic, it's just ludicrous to me.
Face, but the economic damage that Brexit has caused is becoming clearer and harder to ignore. John
The more the time goes on, the easier it is for us to, differentiate the impacts of Brexit, COVID, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. If we go to the actual article, which I found fairly interesting, some of this stuff, you got this guy Ian Perkins. He's on the, he's buying monkfish, scallops, turbot, cuttlefish to send to his customers. Most of them in the EU. That the people in Britain don't really have a taste for a lot of these kind of fish that he's getting. Obviously, people in Britain prefer white fish like cod and fish like salmon, which those are great, but the thing is some of those aren't around the UK. We have to import them. It's costing him £300 a day because of all the customs and health certificates and everything else. For a small to medium business, that's insane. Johnson telling him his business will boom, well, it's going to bust. It's pretty crazy to me that these are the models they use. They based the economic growth that we could have had. They looked at the US, Germany, New Zealand, Norway and Australia, all very different economies. So I'm a bit miffed about why they used those. They said that because those economies were doing similar to the UK at the time. You have £31 billion shortfall. £31 billion we could have had. And do you know what else? That's still less than the amount we paid for test and trace. The Brexit impact potentially for year one is less than what we paid for test and trace. I mean, that's crazy, isn't it? I love how they call it doppelganger UK as well. That's hilarious. But, test and trace is still more expensive. It costs more than 5.2% of our GDP to have a system that didn't actually work. Crazy. Compared the UK performance from 6 years ago with those economies they picked out, the investment by, as the video says, is significantly lower. Service was higher, but it's not made up for the shortfall in goods. That's the gentleman they interviewed. The CER's analysis showed that Brexit cost the UK billions of pounds in lost trade, investment and tax revenue. That's money the country could really do with. At the Conservative Party conference last October, the Prime Minister promised the UK was on the way of becoming a high-wage economy, but don't ask for high wages. If the economy is 5% smaller than it would be otherwise, or otherwise would have been, then we are all 5% poorer. That's not actually true, because that's not how growth works. If the economy grows by 3%, we don't get 3% richer, as in everyone. Typically, it doesn't really help people apart from the rich, but when the economy goes down, it impacts everyone. So I guess it's not a super wrong statement, but it's kind of wrong. It also means that taxes have to rise to fund the same quality of health public services like we had before, because obviously if the government has a shortfall, the only thing it could do is either borrow more or tax more, and the government have chosen to tax more, which further kind of contracts the economy. The economic costs of Brexit are becoming clearer. For now, there's little sign of widespread disappointment among those who believed in Boris Johnson's vision, and others sold them 6 years ago. Ian Perkins appears to be in a minority. Some of that's still some overlap from the video, but point being is that this is the key here. 5.2% of our GDP, or £31 billion, cut off from Brexit. I mean, look at that. That's crazy. But yeah, I don't know what more to say about this apart from like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can. And yeah, how the hell Brexit year one has cost more than the test and trace system, I will never know. But I'll catch you in the next one.